A lone Fulani herdsman in indigo robes guides his cattle across the shallows, their bells chiming softly. The camera drifts to reveal the ancient walls of Kano, their mud-brick ramparts glowing gold in the fading light. Come, gather close, let the fire's glow warm your face as the West African night settles around us. The air here carries memories of empires that rose like termite mounds, of queens who led armies, of poets who turned suffering into song. Behind him, the silhouettes of Zuria's clay architecture stretched toward the starry sky. Builders raised walls so vast, foreigners would later claim giants made them. And yes, men and women lived and died under systems of bondage older than the transatlantic trade. Their stories are not footnotes. They are the roots of the baobab. The same trade routes that brought wealth and knowledge also carried darker cargo human lives, bartered and sold in markets older than memory. For in the tapestry of West African history, threads of gold are interwoven with those of iron chains. Tonight, we journey not across oceans, but through time, slavery, that most ancient of institutions, was woven into the fabric of society long before European ships appeared on the horizon. It was a system both familiar and alien where captives might rise to positions of influence, where entire communities could be uprooted by the fortunes of war. A desert wind stirs the sand, revealing a single rusted manacle half buried near its base. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Griots, the keepers of oral tradition, sang of heroes and villains alike, preserving the complexities of their world for generations to come. It is a reminder that history is never simple, that progress is never linear, and that the seeds of both our greatest achievements and our deepest shames often spring from the same soil. In the coming tales, we will explore the rise and fall of empires, the intricate web of trade that connected West Africa to the wider world, and the resilience of cultures that endured centuries of upheaval. We will grapple with the paradoxes of societies that produced both great beauty and unspeakable cruelty, seeking always to understand rather than to judge. In their songs, we hear echoes of lives lived in defiance of chains, of cultures that refused to be erased, of hope that burned even in the darkest night. For to understand the wound, we must first trace the knife. For in the tales of ancient West Africa, we may yet find wisdom to light our way forward, and courage to face the challenges that lie ahead. The night is deep, the stars are bright, and the stories of our ancestors await. But fear not, dear listener, the fire burns bright, the stars are patient, and the earth remembers every name. To the ancient kingdoms of West Africa, where splendor and sorrow lived side by side. Timbuktu, that fabled city of learning, housed libraries that rivaled those of the Islamic world. Scribes penned intricate manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, their words a testament to the intellectual prowess of a continent often misunderstood. We will walk the streets of great cities now, lost to time, stand in the shadow of mighty kings, and bear witness to the struggles of those whose names have been forgotten. For in understanding the fullness of this history, its triumphs and its tragedies, we honor the countless souls who have shaped the world we inherit. In these lands, history whispers through the rustling leaves of baobab trees and echoes in the footsteps of countless generations. From the golden sands of the Sahara to the lush forests of the Guinea coast, a tapestry of cultures and civilizations has been woven over millennia. We stand at the threshold of a world both familiar and utterly foreign, a world where great cities rose from the earth, their mud-brick walls stretching towards the heavens. these lands were never dark or simple. Here, scholars debated astronomy while Europe slept. In the great empires of Ghana, Mali and Songhai gold flowed like water, and salt was worth its weight in precious metal. But with greatness came complexity, and with complexity, the seeds of both triumph and tragedy. We begin where few dare to look, not at the horrors of the Atlantic, but at the complex cruelties Africans inflicted upon each other. In the courts of mighty kings and the humble compounds of village chiefs, power was measured not just in gold, but in the number of souls one could command. Yet even in the depths of such darkness, sparks of humanity endured. As we delve deeper into the annals of West African history, we must steel ourselves for tales of both wonder and woe. Let's pause here for a moment. The night is young, and our journey has only just begun. For in the end, this is not just the story of West Africa, it is the story of humanity itself, in all its complexity and contradiction. So draw closer to the fire, dear listeners, and open your hearts to the whispers of the past. The operation happened before puberty. Often to war captives or troublesome noble sons, the surgeon's knife was called maganin, hunkale, the medicine for sense. A cruel joke, for what sense is there in a childhood stolen twice over, first from your family, then from your own body? To be a eunuch in the Hausa kingdoms was to be both feared and forgotten. He did not struggle against the iron grip of the masked youth. The boy drifted in and out of consciousness, his world reduced to the throbbing pain between his legs and the cool touch of damp cloths on his forehead. In his delirium, he saw his mother, her familiar form blurred and distorted as if viewed through rippling water. Her song, once a comfort, now sounded alien and discordant. His throat felt raw, as if he had been screaming for days. Perhaps he had been. The old eunuch offered him a sip of water from a clay cup. Perhaps he knew resistance was futile. Or perhaps, in some deep recess of his mind, he had already accepted his fate. You are now a servant of the palace, a guardian of secrets, a keeper of trust. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and incense, masking the underlying smell of blood and sickness. It was as if the surgeon's knife had cut away not just his manhood, but his very ability to grieve. To guard the royal harem, his mutilation, the ultimate guarantee of trust. But at night, when the palace slept, he'd press his ear to the cool earth, listening for the drums of his lost village. His body remained frozen in time, trapped between childhood and adulthood. The heavy silk died. The deep indigo of royalty settled perfectly around the ruler's brow. The emir nodded his approval, barely acknowledging Yurima's presence. It was the way of things. Sunaks were tools, not people. Useful, but ultimately disposable. His voice never broke. His chin remained smooth, and his frame stayed slight and willowy. But his eyes grew old. The small movement sent a jolt of phantom pain through his hand, a memory of that long-ago day when the surgeon's knife had changed his life forever. His world was defined by its walls, his life governed by its rhythms. He knew every secret passage, every hidden alcove. He could recite the lineage of every concubine in the harem, knew the true parentage of each of the emir's children. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. This knowledge was his power, his currency in a world where he had been stripped of everything else. The scar on his thumb, A perfect crescent where he had bitten through flesh. He would close his eyes and see the rolling hills of his homeland, smell the rich earth after rain, hear the laughter of his family. He straightened his robes, smoothed his features into their customary blank expression, and stepped out into the corridor. The palace was stirring to life, and there was work to be done. These memories were both a comfort and a torment, a reminder of all he had lost and could never regain. A nail in a desperate attempt to stifle his screams was a constant reminder of what he had lost. An old eunuch, his face lined with years of silent service, tended to the boy's wounds with gentle hands. His emotions, his thoughts, his very sense of self-all were hidden behind that smooth, ageless visage. Urema bowed low and backed out of the room, his silk slippers making no sound on the intricate tile floor. He sank onto his sleeping mat, his fingers tracing the scar on his thumb. The memory of that day still had the power to make him tremble, even after all these years. As he moved through the palace corridors, other servants and courtiers stepped aside, averting their eyes. He was used to this treatment, a mixture of fear, disgust, and grudging respect. The Borno surgeon, a man renowned for his skill with the blade, tested its edge with a calloused thumb, satisfied. He nodded to his assistants. The boy's eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the flickering torchlight. But more than that, he remembered the moment he realized that his old life was gone forever. In that instant, as the surgeon's knife did its cruel work, Urema had died and been reborn. He became adept at moving unseen, at hearing whispers not meant for his ears, at reading the unspoken language of glances and gestures that governed life in the royal court. In that moment, time seemed to slow. His hands betray him. The left thumb bears a scar where he bit through it during the cutting, trying to muffle his screams. The boy closed his eyes, bracing for the pain that would reshape his destiny. The boy could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic drumming that echoed the distant rhythms of his homeland. The camera blurs, then refocuses on the surgeon, wiping his hands on a strip of white linen now stained rust red. 1 in 3 boys died of infection. The survivors, their voices never deepened, their beards never grew. They became living ghosts, moving through palace corridors with the whisper of silk slippers always present, never seen. He thought of his mother's hands, rough from years of pounding millet, yet gentle when they smoothed his brow. He remembered the taste of fresh milk, still warm from the cow, and the laughter of his siblings as they chased each other through fields of but those memories were fading now, like mist under the harsh sun of his new reality. The surgeon approached, his face an expressionless mask. They used no anesthesia, only honey and spider webs to staunch the bleeding. The days that followed were a haze of agony and fever dreams. When lucidity finally returned, the boy found himself in a small, windowless room. "You have survived," the old man said, his voice high and reedy. "Now you must learn to live." The boy tried to speak, but no words came. "Your new life begins today," he continued. "Forget who you were. That boy is dead." The boy wanted to weep, to rage against the injustice of it all, but no tears came. Years passed, and the boy became a manor, at least what passed for a man in his new world. He learned the ways of the palace, the intricate dance of power and submission. His new name was Urema, Little Prince, a mockery. He would never father children, never lead armies. His sole purpose, Yarima's hands moved with practiced precision as he adjusted the emir's turban. As Yarima stepped back, his left thumb brushed against the ornate clasp of the emir's robe. But Yarima's face betrayed nothing. Years of practice had taught him to school his features into a mask of placid servitude. The emir dismissed him with a wave. Already turning his attention to the day's matters of state in the privacy of his own small chamber, Yarima allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. He remembered the searing pain, the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, the feeling of something essential being torn away. Now, he was a creature of the palace, but sometimes, in the dark of night, Yarima would allow himself to remember. As the call to prayer echoed across the city, Yarima rose and prepared for another day of silent service. Let's pause here for a moment. The gilded halls of royal compounds tell only half the story. Sparks of defiance flickered. Enslaved artisans, were they prayers for deliverance, curses upon their captors, or simply a desperate attempt to leave some mark of their existence? Whatever their intent, slavery in West Africa took many forms, often bearing little resemblance to the brutal chattel slavery that would later devastate the Americas. For every slave who found a measure of security or status, countless others lived lives of unrelenting toil and degradation. A child, no more than 10, collapses from exhaustion. The quarries of Noak, the iron forges of Taruga, the salt mines of the Sahel, these were places of misery, where human beings were worked to the bone and discarded like broken tools. In many societies, slaves could own property, marry, and even rise to positions of significant influence. Criminals could be sentenced to slavery as punishment for their crimes. A young woman, her eyes hollow with despair, is examined by a potential buyer. While European demand would eventually reshape and intensify the system in horrific ways, slavery was not a foreign import to West Africa. It was a deeply rooted institution with its own internal logic and justifications. Local markets in major cities served as hubs where slaves from various sources were bought and sold. Entire economies were built on the backs of enslaved labor. The gold mines of Bambouk and Bure, the salt pans of Tagaza, the cola nut plantations of the forest Zonzol relied heavily on slave labor to fuel their production. This economic engine, in turn, supported the growth of powerful states and the flourishing of complex urban cultures. Long-distance trade routes carried enslaved people across vast distances, from the forests of the Guinea coast to the Saharan Oases and beyond. The story of West African slavery is not one of simple villains and victims, but a reminder of the depths of both cruelty and resilience that lie within the human heart. The constant threat of enslavement created an atmosphere of fear and instability that permeated many societies. The two images briefly overlap before the screen fades to black. As the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, we prepare to continue our journey through the rich and complex history of West Africa. Trust between neighboring groups was often shattered, as today's allies could become tomorrow's slave raiders. Some individuals even voluntarily entered into slavery, seeing it as a preferable alternative to starvation or destitution. The children of slaves were often born free, and paths to manumission existed, however difficult they might be to traverse. These hidden messages have outlived the empires that sought to erase their creators. The hidden symbols left by enslaved artisans, the preservation of cultural traditions in the face of oppression, the countless small acts of resistance and solidarity all speak to a refusal to be fully broken, even under the weight of chains. The internal weaknesses and divisions created by the slave trade left many societies vulnerable to later European encroachment. The moral and psychological scars of centuries of institutionalized bondage would not easily heal. The bronzes still gleam, the walls still stand tall, but the names of those who ordered their construction have long since faded from memory. Captives taken in battle formed a significant portion of the slave population in many states. The constant conflicts between rival kingdoms and city-states ensured a steady supply of human chattel. Their spirits unbroken, wove secret messages into the very fabric of their oppressor's glory. A barely perceptible Adinkra symbol, etched into a bronze plaque. A whisper of home, hidden in plain sight. A subtle alteration to a ritual mask, transforming a tool of subjugation into a silent cry of resistance. For every pampered court slave, thousands more suffered under the merciless sun. Their labor, the foundation of West Africa's greatest kingdoms, the walls of Benin, the bronzes of Haifa, long before European ships darkened the horizon. Intricate systems of bondage and servitude already crisscrossed the region, from the gold-rich empires of Ghana and Mali to the cities of the Hausa and the mighty Oyo Empire. Slavery was deeply ingrained in the social and economic fabric of West African societies. As the embers of our campfire fade and the first stars emerge above, the terraces of Suka, these marvels were not born of willing hands. They were monuments to human suffering, each brick and statue a testament to countless lives ground to dust beneath the weight of empire. Yet even in the depths of such misery, these acts of quiet rebellion perplex historians to this day. Let us take a moment here. The story of West African slavery is not a simple tale of villains and victims. It is a complex tapestry woven from countless threads of human experience. But to understand this system, we must first shed our modern preconceptions. This is not to diminish the very real suffering of those in bondage. The methods by which people became enslaved were equally diverse and often deeply intertwined with the cycles of war and conquest that shaped the region. But war was not the only path to bondage. In times of famine or economic hardship, desperate families might sell a child into slavery to ensure the survival of the rest. The slave trade itself was a complex network that spanned the entire region. It is crucial to note that this internal African slave trade predated and long outlived the transatlantic slave trade. The impact of slavery on West African societies was profound and far-reaching, yet the cost in human suffering was immeasurable. Families were torn apart, cultures uprooted, and countless lives cut short by the brutal conditions of slavery. The legacy of this system would cast a long shadow over West African history, yet even in the darkest chapters of this history, we find testament to the indomitable human spirit. As we sit here in the quiet of the night, surrounded by the echoes of history, let us reflect on the complex tapestry of human experience that has shaped this land. The chains may be gone, but their imprint remains. A challenge to us all to confront the darker chapters of our shared past and to build a future worthy of those who endured so much. Not all rebellions roared like lions. Some were as quiet as a mouse's footsteps, as subtle as a change in the wind. In the slave quarters of Hausa land, resistance took on 1,000 forms. The camera pans up to her face, eyes closed, lips barely moving as she hums a melody from a distant homeland. Each as unique as the souls who dared to dream of freedom. In the dead of night, they slipped from their quarters, armed with nothing but desperation and the burning desire for freedom. One man, his back crisscrossed with scars, keeps watch while others tend to blistered feet and share meager rations. They ran, hearts pounding in time with their bare feet on the dusty earth, praying to gods old, and knew that this time, they would taste liberty. They were the ones who smiled and bowed, who answered two names, not their own, who raised their master's children with a tenderness that belied their captivity. And yet, even in their seeming submission, they resisted. A Hausa mistress might dress her favorite slave in fine silks, the slave who served as his master's eyes and ears in the market might slip vital information to fellow captives. Here, in the fleeting moments before sleep, claimed them. They shared stories of home, of ancestors whose names they dared not forget. They passed down knowledge in whispers and touches. How to read the stars, how to heal with herbs, how to keep hope alive when all seemed lost. Remember who you are, children of kings and warriors. One day, our people will rise again. The concubine who shared her owner's bed could whisper secrets into the night, planting seeds of doubt that would bloom into discord. The camera zooms in on the fabric, revealing hidden symbols and patterns that tell a story of resilience and hope. The ones who kept their true names locked in their hearts, who wove their defiance into every aspect of their lives, who never stopped believing in a future where their descendants would walk free. In every act of kindness between former enemies, in every celebration of shared heritage, in every child who learns the old songs and dances, we see the triumph of the human spirit over the cruelest of institutions. Their blood runs in the veins of millions. Their stories etched into the very fabric of West African culture. The night air whispers ancient secrets, and we rest beneath the same stars that once guided those seeking freedom. Every line of poetry, every child who bears a name with roots stretching back to those distant, difficult days, they greet each other warmly. Their interactions a testament to the bonds forged in the crucible of shared history. Their story is not just one of suffering, but of triumph, the triumph of the human spirit over unimaginable adversity. For in honoring those who came before, we light the way for generations yet to come. The market's hollow smile may be gone, but the true smile of freedom, hard-won and precious, now graces the faces of millions. His gnarled hands move in intricate patterns as he demonstrates a traditional weaving technique, his eyes alight with the fire of preservation. The new day dawns, full of promise, as we honor the past and look to the future. Every smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, every bow that held a fraction too long. These were the silent battlegrounds, where slaves fought for their dignity, but she could not stop the woman from weaving secret symbols into the fabric, each stitch a coded message of defiance. It was the quiet, relentless resistance of those who refused to let their spirits be enslaved. They kept their cultures alive, passing down knowledge and traditions in whispers and stolen moments. They found ways to assert their humanity in a system designed to strip it away, and in doing so, they laid the foundation for a future where their descendants could stand tall and proud, free at last. The winds of change swept across Africa, bringing with them new ideas, new conflicts, and eventually the slow, painful death of the slave trade. Let us remember that even in the darkest of times, hope can flourish. That culture and identity are not easily erased, no matter how hard oppressors may try, and that true freedom begins in the heart and mind, long before it is written into law. It's in the proverbs passed down through generations, in the rhythms of the talking drums, in the intricate patterns of woven cloth. The masters may have written the official histories, but it was the slaves who shaped the soul of the land. But the legacy of those who had resisted, who had kept their cultures alive in the face of oppression, lived on. The market's hollow smile may have branded them as property, but in the shadows of night, they reclaimed their humanity, one whispered story at a time. Some slaves found themselves elevated to positions of relative privilege, trusted advisors to their masters or skilled artisans whose talents were too valuable to waste. But even these favored ones knew the precariousness of their position. A single misstep, a whispered rumor, and they could find themselves back on the auction block, their world shattered in an instant. Etsuako, but our minds, our spirits, those were ours alone, and in those hidden corners of self, they nurtured dreams of a future where their children's children would walk free under the African sun. His fingers, adorned with rings, trembled slightly as he gestures, revealing the brand of ownership on his wrist. A voice barely louder than a breath. It means the unbreakable in my mother's tongue. The speaker, an old Igbo woman, would tell her grandchildren years later, her voice cracking with the weight of memory. We hid our gods in their rhythms, our histories in the rise and fall of the notes. The masters thought we sang to please them, but every word was a prayer for their downfall. And so, the market's hollow smile echoed with melodies that carried the weight of nations, of peoples torn from their roots, but never truly conquered. A young Gwari girl with eyes like embers traced the name in the dirt with a trembling finger. Around her, other slaves leaned in, drinking in the forbidden syllables of their true selves. A Kanori man nodded, his weathered face creasing with a bittersweet smile. I was Kaka, he murmured, named for the harvest moon that blessed my birth. One by one, they shared the names that had been stolen from them, tasting freedom on their lips, if only for a moment. But names were just the beginning. In the cracks between their masters' commands, they wove a tapestry of defiance. A Yoruba cook slipped extra pepper into the emir's stew. A silent rebellion with every burning mouthful. A Nupe groom whispered secrets to the horses, teaching them to shy away from their master's touch. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when even the night birds held their breath, they sang, Cap. The songs were our weapons, yet not all resistance was so subtle. Some slaves, pushed beyond endurance, chose to fight with fists and fire. But for every slave who fled, countless others remained, their chains both physical and invisible. The masters thought they owned us, body and soul. A former house slave once said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the years passed, the nature of slavery in Hausa land shifted and changed like sand in the wind. Yet even in these moments of apparent collaboration, resistance persisted. As the sun set on another day in Hausa land, the air thick with the scent of cooking fires and the distant echo of evening prayers, the slaves gathered in their quarters. "We may be in chains," the old man would say, his voice barely audible above the night sounds, "but our spirits soar free as eagles, and rise they did, though not in the way many had imagined. Today, in the bustling markets of Kano and the quiet villages of the Nigerian countryside, you can still hear the echoes of that resistance." As we sit here beneath the vast African sky, let us remember those unsung heroes. The market's hollow smile is long gone, but the spirit of those who refuse to be broken lives on. Let's pause here for a moment. In the end, it was not the clash of armies or the decrees of distant rulers that truly ended slavery in. As we look to that future, let us carry with us the lessons of those who came before. The market's hollow smile may have faded into history, but the legacy of those who resisted lives on in every beat of the drum. And so, as we close this chapter of our journey through time, let us carry forward the flame of remembrance. Let's pause here for a moment. They say Mansa Musa of Mali embarked on his legendary hag with a caravan stretching as far as the eye could see. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country. The margin bears an ornate illustration of a man holding a golden orb and scepter. That he distributed so much gold along his journey, he single-handedly caused inflation in Cairo and Mecca. He brought with him 60,000 men and 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4 pounds of gold bars. But European mapmakers of the time portrayed him as a European monarch, unable to conceive of African wealth without familiar trappings. The truth, as always, lies buried in the sands of time. Let us ponder the legacy of Mansa Musa. The scene transitions to the bustling streets of a medieval market, where traders from across Africa and the Middle East haggle over goods. His pilgrimage may have dazzled the world with but it was his investment in education and architecture that truly shaped the Mali Empire. The great mosques of Timbuktu and Gao still stand as testaments to his vision, their mud-brick walls defying centuries of Saharan winds. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the baobab's sprawling branches. Trade routes pulse like veins across the Sahara, connecting Mali to North Africa and the Middle East. Gold was abundant, yes, but salt was worth its weight in the precious metal, and battles swirl around him, bringing the epic of Sundiata Mansa Musa's legendary Gretuncle to life. Control of trade routes was as valuable as the goods themselves. They trace his ancestry back to Sundiata, the founder of the Mali Empire, weaving a narrative that blends myth and history into an inseparable whole in their songs. Musa is not just a man, but a link in a chain of divine kingship stretching back to the dawn of time. And in a land where oral tradition reigned supreme, the power of a ruler's name and deeds could outlast any material treasure. His devotion to Islam was genuine, but it also served as a unifying force for his empire and a means of legitimizing his rule in the eyes of the wider Muslim world. The scene expands to show similar students across Africa and the diaspora, all connected by this shared history. By positioning himself as a defender of the faith, he elevated Mali's status on the global stage. In the classrooms of Bamako and the community centers of Harlem, his name still evokes a time when African empires stood as equals to any in the world. And so we end our tale here. Beneath the vast African sky, the stars above have witnessed countless empires rise and fall, yet they keep their secrets close. As for Mansa Musa, his legend lives on in the earth, in the air, and in the hearts of those who still dream of golden ages past and yet to come. It serves as a powerful counter-narrative to centuries of colonial distortion. But such comparisons often fall short of capturing the unique context of West African kingship. The line between myth and reality remains blurred, as it often does when peering so far into the past. But in that ambiguity lies the beauty of history, a constant dialogue between what we know, what we believe, and what we hope to discover. Is it the mountains of gold he distributed on his Hajj? The architectural marvels he commissioned? Or is it something less tangible, the seeds of knowledge he planted, the cultural bridges he built, the legacy that continues to inspire pride in West African heritage to this day? The Monde concept of Nyama, the spiritual force that flows through all things in Musa's rule with a metaphysical dimension foreign to European notions of divine right. But how much of his tale is carved from historical fact, and how much from the shimmering mirages of desert lore? The opulence and protocol of both scenes highlight the parallels between these centers of power. Let us not forget the complex tapestry of cultures and peoples that made up the Mali Empire, from the Mandinka heartlands to the Songhai River traders, from the Fulani herders to the Tuareg desert nomads. Mansa Musa presided over a diverse realm that required both strength and subtlety to govern. His ability to balance these competing interests while expanding Mali's influence speaks to a political acumen often overshadowed by tales of his wealth. A time when Timbuktu rivaled Cairo and Baghdad as a center of Islamic learning. Scholars from as far as Andalusia and Persia flocked to its renowned universities. But this golden age was not built on gold alone. It was forged in the crucible of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. He sent his people to study in Fez and Mecca, and brought back architects to design grand structures that would outlast his own reign. This investment in human capital would echo through generations, long after the gold dust had settled. It speaks of Musa's determination to bring back scholars and architects to his empire. The scribe writes, "He returned not with gold, but with knowledge, the true wealth of nations." No direct quote from the emperor. But then, did his actions not speak louder than words? The Arab chroniclers agree. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage in 1324 was unprecedented in its opulence and scale. Her gloved hands tremble as she reveals a passage describing Mansa Musa's return from Mecca. In 2013, this fragile document was rescued from militants who sought to destroy Timbuktu's libraries. Let's pause here for a moment as the embers of our campfire fade. Mansa Musa's reign marked the zenith of the Mali Empire. The emperor understood that true power lay not just in military might or material wealth, but in the cultivation of knowledge and the arts. Indeed, the very concept of wealth in 14th century West Africa differed greatly from our modern understanding. The Griots, West Africa's sacred keepers of history, still sing of Mansa Musa's lineage, yet for all his grandeur, Mansa Musa was also a man of his time, shaped by the political and religious currents of 14th century Africa. It's tempting to view Mansa Musa through a European lens, to compare him to the monarchs of medieval Christendom. As we sift through the layers of legend and fact, we must ask ourselves, what is the true measure of Mansa Musa's greatness? Perhaps the most enduring testament to Mansa Musa's reign is not found in ancient manuscripts or buried treasures, but in the living memory of his people. As our journey through the annals of West African history draws to a close, we are left with more questions than answers. In the heart of West Africa lies history's uncomfortable knot. His brother returned the favor by sparing him during the counterattack. Amina, watching from the ridge, promoted both to her personal guard, a lesson or a threat, wrapped in mercy. Amina, let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. At first, he fought with reluctance, each swing of his sword a reminder of his lost freedom. But as the years passed, something changed. Was it Stockholm Syndrome? Or did he find a sense of purpose in the chaos of war? As the armies pushed the boundaries of Zatsu far beyond its original borders, absorbing neighboring states and establishing new trade routes, the wealth that flowed into her coffers came at a terrible human cost. Yet it also brought advancements in architecture, agriculture, and the arts. But it was her infantry, the very slaves we've spoken of, who often bore the brunt of the fighting, their blood soaked into foreign soil, fertilizing Amina's growing empire. We see him saving a fellow soldier's life, earning a nod of approval from a Hausa officer, and finally, standing tall as he receives a commendation from Amina herself. Though less numerous than their male counterparts, these warriors challenged the gender norms of their time. Some were slaves, others volunteers seeking glory or escape from societal constraints. Their stories, too often overlooked, add another layer to our understanding of this complex era. The cultural and genetic mixing that resulted from her conquests shaped the ethnic landscape of the region for generations to come. Amina's achievements came at a terrible cost, yet they also laid the groundwork for future developments that would shape West Africa. How do we reconcile the brilliance of her military and political acumen with the moral implications of her methods? Languages blended, traditions merged, and new identities were forged in the aftermath of her campaigns. The weight of centuries presses upon us, demanding that we examine our own values and the choices we make in pursuit of our goals. For in the end, are we not all shaped by the same forces that molded Amina and her armies? Amina's reliance on slave soldiers was both her strength and her potential weakness. The land seems to pulse with the echoes of countless untold stories, each waiting to be discovered and understood. But the echoes of Amina's reign continue to resonate through time, a complex harmony of triumph and tragedy. As we move forward, let us carry with us the lessons of the past, ever mindful of the power we wield and the responsibilities that come with it. Amina's story serves as a reminder that progress and oppression often walk hand in hand, that the heroes of one era may be viewed as villains by another. The threat of rebellion always loomed, a sword of Damocles hanging over her empire. How she managed this delicate balance speaks to her skill as a ruler and strategist. Loyalty born of necessity sometimes grew into something deeper, more complex. It is a living, breathing entity that shapes our present and informs our future. And in the story of Amina's slave armies, we find a mirror that reflects not just the past, but our own humanity in all its glory and all its flaws. As the camera pans out, we see she is one of many, a diverse group of women preparing for the coming conflict. Some claimed she possessed magical abilities, that she could turn into a bird to spy on her enemies or become invisible on the battlefield. These tales, whether true or not, served to enhance her mystique and strike fear into the hearts of her opponents. Some slaves rose through the ranks, becoming trusted advisors and fearsome commanders in their own right. But the scars of their origins never truly faded. It's in these quiet moments that we can reflect on the complexities of our shared history, and we see her advisors arguing passionately. The Queen herself stands silent, her eyes scanning the room, weighing loyalties and calculating risks. Legendary, her armies, a patchwork of conquered peoples, became the instrument of her ambition. Yet within this system of oppression, individual stories of courage and resilience emerged. Conquests were fueled by the very system we've just mourned. Her elite cavalry were free Hausa nobles, but the infantry, slaves, captives forced to fight for the kingdom that broke them. Some historians claim she offered freedom after 10 years of service. The records, are silent. Where empires rose and fell like the tides of the Niger, we find a story that challenges our modern sensibilities. Queen Amina of Zatsu, a name that rings with power and conquest, built her legend on a foundation as complex as it was controversial. The echoes of history whispered tales, both glorious and troubling. Here, the day I stabbed a Bauchi raider to save Amina's banner, she called me Dan Yue, son of the earth. But the earth doesn't chain its sons. Casting shadows that seem to take on the shapes of long-forgotten battles, she turned slaves into warriors. An enslaved archer hesitates when he recognizes his brother among the enemy. The camera freezes mid-shot, the arrow trembling between past and present. Then warriors into legends, the same men who cursed her name at night, chanted it in battle. And when they died, their stories were claimed by the very kingdom that had stolen them. The old warrior's voice, weathered by time and hardship, carries a weight that transcends generations. His tale is one of countless others, each a thread in the tapestry of Amina's empire. The flames dance. Perhaps this was Amina's genius or her cruelty. War makes strange mirrors. That day, the archer reportedly missed on purpose. The aroma of spices and simmering vegetables fills the air, a reminder that even in times of conflict, life's simple pleasures endure. Amina's reign was a paradox, a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of our capacity for cruelty. Consider the young Nupe boy, torn from his village and thrust into the ranks of Amina's forces. The lines between captor and captive blurred in the crucible of combat. Amina's conquests reshaped the political landscape of West Africa. The Queen's military innovations were legendary. She is credited with introducing metal armor to her cavalry, giving them a decisive edge in battle. Let us not forget the women who served in Amina's armies. As Amina's power grew, so too did the legend surrounding her. But power, no matter how great, is always precarious. The legacy of Amina's slave armies extends far beyond her reign. As we delve deeper into this chapter of history, we must grapple with uncomfortable truths. Perhaps there is no easy answer. History, like the human heart, contains multitudes. As the fire dies down and the stars wheel overhead, we're left to ponder these questions. The night grows late and our tale draws to a close. For in the end, history is not just a collection of facts and dates. They concealed the legacy young ones. The elder would begin. Fragments of pottery, ancient trade records, and even the faintest traces of fortifications tell a story of a ruler who was as much a diplomat as she was a conqueror. She forged alliances with neighboring kingdoms, established trade routes that stretched across the sun, and implemented reforms that would shape her society for centuries to come, and names, pointing to a small portrait of Queen Zatsu, tucked away in the corner of a textbook page, her voice carrying the weight of generations. The colonial powers, in their zeal to reshape Africa in their own image, systematically dismantled the institutions and records that might have preserved a more complete picture of this remarkable woman. Before the white man came with his guns and his guard, before the Fulani swept across our lands, she challenged the gender norms of her time, not by rejecting femininity, but by redefining what it meant to be both a woman and a ruler, but as a complex, multifaceted individual whose legacy continues to resonate in their own lives. As she reaches out to touch the painted figure, the mural seems to come to life, the Queen's eyes meeting hers with a knowing smile. They discuss the ways in which her story has been shaped and reshaped over time, how different groups have claimed her as a symbol for their own causes, and how the gaps in our knowledge have been filled with speculation and imagination. Perhaps the answer lies not in the dusty pages of colonial archives or the fragmentary remains of ancient pottery. A group of young women, dressed in a mix of traditional and contemporary clothing, walk confidently past, their laughter echoing through the ages. To challenge our assumptions about gender and power, and to recognize the complex tapestry of influences that have shaped our world, her story reminds us that the past is never truly lost. It lives on in the stories we tell, the values we uphold, and the dreams we dare to pursue. For in the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, and the steady heartbeat of the earth itself, we might just hear the echoes of a queen who dared to defy expectations and whose legacy continues to shape the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. but in the hearts and minds of those who continue to draw inspiration from her example. In the end, her greatest legacy may be not the battles she won or the reforms she implemented, but as a living symbol of the enduring strength and resilience of a people who refuse to be forgotten. And in that moment, we understand that her true power lies not in the legends that have grown around her name, but in the way her spirit continues to inspire and challenge us centuries after her reign, but the way in which her story continues to ignite the imagination and spark conversations about power, gender, and the nature of leadership itself. She surrounded herself with female advisors, trained women as warriors and spies, and implemented policies that improved the lives of women throughout her kingdom. But I must warn you, what you will find in these textbooks is only a fraction of her true story. The students leave the classroom with more questions than answers, but also with a newfound appreciation for the complexities of their own heritage. Her story serves as a testament to the enduring power of legacy and a challenge to future generations to continue uncovering the hidden histories that shape our world. There was a queen who ruled with strength and compassion. They've grown up in a world where ancient African history is often relegated to the margins, overshadowed by tales of European discovery and conquest. She implemented agricultural reforms that increased food production, established a system of taxation that funded public works, and encouraged the development of crafts and trades that would make her kingdom prosperous. Her military campaigns were not mere conquests, but strategic moves to secure trade routes and protect her people from external threats. But as their teacher begins to speak, weaving together fragments of archaeological evidence, oral traditions, and critical analysis of colonial records, a new picture begins to emerge. Her name was Zatsu, and she was as fierce as the lion and as cunning as the fox. Of a queen whose very existence challenged the narratives woven by those who came after. But whispers persisted, carried on the desert wind, of a ruler whose power transcended the boundaries of gender and expectation. When the sands of time settled over the ancient city of Zaria, they buried more than just stone and bone. Stories of Queen Zatsar endured. They spoke of a woman who donned armor instead of silks, who wielded both sword and scepter with equal grace. Yet, as empires rose and fell, as new powers sought to reshape the land, these tales became fragmented, distorted by the lens of those who sought to diminish her. In the quiet corners of marketplaces and the hushed tones of elders, European scholars, one elder, her eyes bright with wisdom, gestures animatedly as she recounts the exploits of Queen Zatsu to wide-eyed children, their pens dripping with the ink of prejudice, dismissed Queen Zatsu as mere folklore, a fanciful creation of a people they deemed primitive. But they underestimated the resilience of memory, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of a warrior queen astride a mighty steed, leading her armies to victory against impossible odds. But the truth, as always, was far more complex than legend would have us believe. The tenacity of a culture that refused to let its heroes fade into obscurity. The colonial era brought with it a tide of erasure, washing away centuries of oral tradition and written record. Capcut prompt. A group of village elders gathered around a fire, their faces illuminated by flickering flames. Listen, the children would lean in. Recent archaeological discoveries have begun to peel back the layers of myth surrounding Queen Zatsu. Yet, even as we uncover these tantalizing glimpses of the historical Zatsu, we must grapple with the uncomfortable reality that much of her story has been lost to time, or deliberately obscured by those who came after. Today, the teacher might say, her voice tinged with a mixture of pride and frustration, we'll be learning about Queen Zatsa. The students exchange glances, some curious, others skeptical. Queen Zatsu, they learn, was not just a warrior, but a visionary. But perhaps, most intriguingly, the teacher tells them of Zatsa's role as a woman in a male-dominated world. As the lesson progresses, the students begin to see Queen Zatsu not as a distant historical figure. In the end, what emerges is not a single, definitive narrative of Queen Zatsu, but a tapestry of possibilities. A reminder that history is not a fixed point, but a living, breathing entity that evolves with each retelling. As night falls over modern Zaria, the echoes of Queen Zatsa's reign can still be felt in the ancient walls, in the rhythms of traditional music, in the fierce pride of its people. So, did Queen Zatsa truly exist as the legends claim? As we stand at the crossroads of past and present, Queen Zatsa's legacy invites us to look beyond the boundaries of recorded history in the quiet of the night, as the stars wheel overhead and the desert wind whispers its ancient secrets. We might just catch a glimpse of Queen Zatsa, not as a static figure frozen in time. Let us pause here for a moment beneath the vast African sky and listen. When Arab travelers first reached the fabled city of Timbuktu in the 14th century, they wrote of a place where gold was as common as dust. This was no mere trading post, it was an intellectual marvel, a labyrinth of libraries and universities spanning the heart of West Africa. Built over centuries by the Mali Empire, Timbuktu became a beacon of learning that rivaled the great centers of the Islamic world. And yet, you've likely never heard the full story. The muezzin's voice fades, and we stand in awe of centuries of wisdom. Dr. Coates, the cartographer, clearly in awe, drew the city as a shimmering oasis with a note, Madinat al-Ulama. Under cover of darkness, they smuggled hundreds of thousands of manuscripts to safety in It wasn't just about preserving paper and ink. It was about protecting the very soul of West African scholarship, where Paris was known for its cathedrals. Timbuktu was a living library designed to preserve and expand human knowledge. And applying modern preservation techniques, the camera pans to reveal rows upon rows of climate-controlled storage units, each holding a piece of Africa's intellectual legacy. The Sahara creeps ever closer, and sandstorms batter the ancient walls. They charted these same constellations, seeking to understand humanity's place in the cosmos. As it swivels to focus on the night sky, the scene transitions to an ancient illustration of an astrolabe, the lines between past and present blurring. It reminds us that the flow of knowledge is not a one-way street from east to west, but a complex network of exchange and innovation. The scholars of Timbuktu were not passive recipients of Arab learning, but active contributors to a global intellectual community. Their work, preserved in fragile manuscripts, speaks across centuries. Perhaps it's the importance of preserving knowledge in the face of adversity, or the power of education to transform societies. How do we honor this legacy? How do we ensure that the next Timbuktu, wherever it may arise, is recognized and nurtured? The weight of centuries settles around us, and we stand at the crossroads of past and future, ready to write the next chapter in humanity's endless pursuit of knowledge. The answers may not be simple, but the quest itself is worthy of those ancient scholars who gazed at the stars and dared to ask why. Or maybe it's a simpler truth, that wisdom can flourish in the most unexpected places, if only we have the eyes to see it. It whispers of a time when Africa was not the dark continent of European imagination, but a blazing torch of knowledge. They lean in, engrossed in discussion, their animated gestures bridging centuries of scholarly tradition. But the city's guardians remain vigilant. UNESCO and local experts work tirelessly to preserve what remains, using cutting-edge technology to digitize manuscripts and stabilize buildings. It lives in the curiosity of every child who picks up a book, in the dedication of every scholar who pushes the boundaries of human knowledge. It reminds us that the pursuit of wisdom is a collective endeavor, one that transcends borders and generations. The Grand Sanka Mosque wasn't just a place of worship. It was the heart of a university system that drew scholars from across the Muslim world. The descendants of those medieval scholars still walk the streets, carrying the weight of generations of knowledge. In small madrasas and family homes, the chain of oral tradition remains unbroken. The wealth that fueled its intellectual pursuits came, in part, from the trans-Saharan slave trade. The city's history is a reminder that human achievement often comes tangled with human cruelty. To truly honor Timbuktu's legacy is to grapple with this duality, to celebrate the heights of scholarship while acknowledging the shadows beneath. Children recite verses from memory, just as their ancestors did 1,000 years ago. The city's manuscript collections, they held secrets of astronomy, mathematics, and medicine that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for centuries. Around her, a circle of elders nod approvingly, their weathered faces etched with pride. European accounts called it the Paris of the medieval African world, but that's a disservice. Priceless manuscripts were scattered, sold to private collectors, or left to rot in damp storerooms. But the desert remembers. Local families kept thousands of texts hidden, passing down the secret locations from generation to generation, a silent act of resistance against those who would erase African intellectual history. His granddaughter watched us intently, taking notes on a tablet computer, the glow reflecting in the old man's wise eyes. The French colonial period nearly erased Timbuktu's legacy, not through outright destruction, but through neglect and theft. Let's pause here for a moment. But Timbuktu's story doesn't end there. In 2012, as extremists threatened to destroy the city's cultural heritage, librarians and volunteers orchestrated a daring rescue. Today, Timbuktu faces new challenges. Climate change threatens the mud brick architecture that has stood for centuries. Yet the true magic of Timbuktu lies not in its past, but in its living traditions. But let's not romanticize. Timbuktu's golden age wasn't without conflict or complexity. As night falls over the desert and the stars emerge in a dazzling canopy, we're reminded of Timbuktu's astronomers. The story of Timbuktu challenges us to rethink our understanding of global history. As we stand on the cusp of a new age of information, what lessons can we draw from Timbuktu? The legacy of Timbuktu isn't confined to dusty shelves or crumbling walls. As our journey through Timbuktu's past and present comes to a close, we're left with a challenge. Let's pause here for a final moment. In indigo-dyed cloth buries a Yuda, filled with herbs at the base of a surviving wall fragment. They were living scripture, each curve encoding the wisdom of Ogun and Olokun. The angles aligned with solstices, the gates opened to sacred groves. Even the sound of footsteps changed when walking the inner Ringza, deliberate acoustic trick to announce intruders to the spirits. The camera catches the moment soil touches vessel, a spark leaps, though nothing flammable is present. They were the physical manifestation of a complex cosmology, a sacred text written in soil and stone. Each section, each carefully placed mound, spoke volumes about the Ido people's relationship with their land, their gods, and the unseen forces that shaped their world. And when the British breached the walls, survivors swore the walls themselves, grand en art in defeat. But warning, before ground was ever broken, Ifa priests would consult the oracle, seeking guidance on the most auspicious time and place to begin. The Aguna and Morn, masters of earthworks, directed the overall design. The Emide's experts in clay ensured the proper consistency and durability of the building material. And always, there were the Ifito, the keepers of sacred knowledge, who made certain that every curve and angle aligned with the cosmic order as revealed through divination. The soil itself was considered a living entity, requiring awakening and respect before it could be shaped to the builder's will. Each Orba would add to the existing structure, leaving their mark on the sacred text of the city. Officers reported nightmares of black snakes coiled around their beds, the same serpent symbol of Edo kingship. Coincidence? Perhaps, but as the Edo say, when you mock the earth remembers. The result was a palimpsest of power and belief, with layers upon layers of meaning embedded in the very fabric of the fortifications. Outbreaks of tropical diseases seemed to target the invaders with uncanny precision. Night after night, they found themselves pursued by enormous black serpents through labyrinthine corridors of mud and stone. Wells would run dry overnight, only to be found full again by morning, but the water within tasted bitter and brought sickness to those who drank it. Archaeologists and historians studying the remnants of the earthworks report strange phenomena, compasses that spin wildly, electronic equipment that fails for no apparent reason. They were, and remain, a living connection to the spiritual world, a sacred text written in earth and stone, waiting for those with the wisdom to read it. Some speak of vivid dreams or waking visions, glimpses of the city as it once was, shimmering like a mirage on the edge of perception. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Edo craftsmen, drawing on techniques passed down through generations, are working to restore sections of the walls using historically accurate methods. It has a delicate balance, honoring the sacred nature of the site while also making it accessible for education and cultural tourism. Young priests and priestesses are relearning the old rituals, the songs that once awakened the soil, like the serpent symbol that so terrified those long ago British officers. It coils through time, shedding old skins and emerging renewed. The sacred text written in soil continues to speak to those who listen, a living testament to the enduring power of Edo wisdom and spirituality. They speak of dreams where the walls rise again, not as barriers, but as bridges between past and future, between the physical and spiritual realms. Strange sounds echoed through the ruins at night, sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The legacy of those earthworks lives on, not just in the physical remnants that still dot the landscape, but in the cultural memory of the Edo people. These serpents, unknown to the British, were powerful symbols in Edo cosmology representing both the authority of the Orba and the cyclical nature of time and power. What was once dismissed as primitive fortification is now being recognized as a sophisticated system that incorporated advanced understanding of acoustics, hydrology, and celestial movements. They knew that the spirits of the walls, though wounded, were far from defeated. The sacred text might have been damaged, but its power lingered, waiting for those who could still read its subtle language. Equipment malfunctioned at crucial moments, as if the very metal refused to cooperate with those who had destroyed the sacred earthworks. Master craftsmen incorporated symbols and glyphs into the very structure of the earth. Certain sections were said to resonate with specific tones when trod upon, creating a form of earthen music, audible only to those attuned to the spirits. New construction projects would encounter unexpected sinkholes or stubborn patches of ground that refused to be excavated. The layout of streets, imposed by colonial planners, seemed to twist and change overnight, reverting to patterns that echoed the old sacred geometries. They could not fathom the depth of what they were destroying. His smug grin fades as the camera reveals his shadow stretched and distorted, as if something beneath the soil is warping it. Each cannonball that struck the earthworks was not just damaging a defensive structure, it was obliterating pages from an ancient and sacred text. Other areas were known to induce visions or heightened states of awareness in those who meditated there at specific times of the lunar cycle. A trained eye could read the history of great kings, the cycles of seasons, and prophecies of things to come, all encoded in the subtle variations of soil and clay. To the Edo, these walls were never just fortifications. The Great Walls of Benin, once stretching over 16,000 kilometers, were more than mere earthen ramparts. Consider the moats that encircled the city. To foreign eyes, they might appear a simple defensive structure, but to the Edo, these water-filled trenches were the domain of Olokon, goddess of the sea and wealth. The ebb and flow of water within them mirrored the tides of the distant ocean, connecting the inland kingdom to the vast powers of the deep. The walls themselves rose in undulating patterns, their curves echoing the rhythms of Edo music and dance. This was sacred geometry centuries before Europe claimed the term. Master builders consulted Ifa divination before each section. Workers sang Orhu to awaken the soil. The construction of these monumental earthworks was a spiritual act as much as an engineering feat. As work progressed, specialized guilds of craftsmen would oversee different aspects of the construction. The walls were not built in a single campaign, but grew organically over centuries. Even the act of walking the walls was imbued with ritual significance. The British, when they finally breached these walls in 1897, saw only obstacles to be overcome. Even in ruin, the walls fought back. Malaria ravaged the occupation troops. Machinery broke. The British occupation of Benin City was marked by a series of inexplicable misfortunes that many Edo people attributed to the anger of the spirits dwelling within the desecrated walls. Most unsettling were the dreams that plagued the colonial officers. Some of the more superstitious soldiers began to whisper that the land itself was turning against them. The Ido people watched these occurrences with a mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. In the years that followed, as the British attempted to reshape Benin City to their own designs, they found themselves constantly stymied by the legacy of the walls. Even today, long after independence, the presence of the walls can still be felt, For the Edo people, these occurrences are simply confirmation of what they have always known. The walls were never mere fortifications. As we sit here, surrounded by the night sounds of modern Benin City, it's easy to imagine the whispers of the ancient walls carried on the breeze. Today, efforts are underway to preserve what remains of the Great Walls and to revive the traditional knowledge associated with their construction. Scholars from around the world have begun to take a renewed interest in the engineering and astronomical alignments of the walls. But perhaps, most importantly, the spiritual significance of the walls is being reclaimed and celebrated by new generations of Edo people. As our fire burns low and the stars wheel overhead, we're reminded that the story of Benin's earthworks is far from over. For centuries, master craftsmen had been pouring their souls into bronze, creating works that would astound the world, but these weren't mere decorations. Each plaque, each statue, each intricately carved tusk, they were living history, the very breath of our ancestors frozen in metal and ivory. 1500 AD marked the zenith of the Benin Empire's golden age. The OBS Palace was a marvel that left Portuguese traders speechless. Walls adorned with thousands of plaques, each a chapter in Benin's epic tale. The bronzes pulsed with A's. That divine energy that flows through all things, the final image lingers on a plaque, showing the Oba receiving tribute from neighboring kingdoms. An altarpiece wasn't just metal, it was a conduit to the spirit world. A group of men in 19th century attire pore over maps of Africa, their fingers tracing trade routes and potential conquests. The coral beaded crown of the Oba didn't just sit on his head, it transformed him into a living god. To touch these objects without proper ritual was to court disaster. To possess them was to hold the very essence of Benin in your hands. The camera lingers on the anguished faces of Benin people, powerless to stop the looting. Leopard statues guarded doorways, their brass bodies gleaming with royal power. 4,000 pieces, maybe more, were torn from altars, pried from walls, stolen from sacred groves, the Oba's ancestral shrines. The final shot shows a group of Victorian-era visitors gawking at a Benin bronze in a glass case, completely disconnected from its true meaning. The very heart of Benin's spiritual power would as the camera pans across the bronze. We see flashes of its creation, its life in the palace, and its violent removal. These pieces are better preserved in Europe, they say, but let's look at the facts. For decades after the looting, many bronzes were stored in damp basements or dusty attics. Some were even used as doorstops in British country homes. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that their true value was widely recognized. Right side shows children in Benin City looking at a black and white photo of that same bronze in a tattered textbook. Imagine it. The accumulated wisdom, the new IDO Museum of West African art rivals any institution in the world for security and preservation techniques. As the camera lingers, the figures seem to come alive, whispering their stories. Elders perform rituals to welcome the artifacts home, while young people look on with a mix of reverence and hope, as thus far resisted calls for unconditional return. It's a complex issue, tangled in laws about museum holdings and thorny questions of precedent. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. But as Benin artist, Victor Hick so powerfully put it, you cannot tell a people their future while holding their past hostage. Each piece is a page in Benin's living history, a tangible link to ancestors and gods. They're imbued with Ace, that vital force that connects the physical and spiritual worlds. It lives on in the hands of modern craftsmen, in the stories passed down through generations. In the very soil of Benin, the bronzes may be scattered, but their power to inspire, to teach, to connect us to our ancestors, that remains unbroken. The pieces blend ancient motifs with contemporary themes. To keep them locked away is just a matter of cultural pride. It is a severing of spiritual ties, a muffling of voices that have spoken for centuries. Nigerian conservators train at top international programs. The will and the expertise are there. What's missing are the artifacts themselves. These priceless artifacts, once the beating heart of a kingdom. Museums around the world are grappling with the ethics of their collections, realizing that the story of how an object was acquired is just as important as the object itself became commodities, and reaches out to touch a holographic Benin bronze. When she removes the headset, there are tears in her eyes. Today, a single Benin bronze can fetch millions at auction. Meanwhile, in Benin City, school children learn their history from faded photographs. The real treasures locked away in climate-controlled vaults. An ocean away, artistry and divine energy of generations loaded onto ships like so much common cargo, and at the heart of it all, the Auber himself, draped in coral beads, the living link between the people and their gods. As Benin's influence grew, so did the whispers of those who coveted its wealth. Scattered to the winds, London, Berlin, New York, the great museums of the West suddenly found themselves flush with exotic African art. But make no mistake, these weren't mere curiosities. They were trophies of empire, tangible proof of Britain's civilizing mission. The very objects that had once proclaimed Benin's greatness now stood as silent witnesses to its humiliation. European traders marveled at the Great Walls of Benin. Longer than the Great Wall of China, some said. They spoke of streets paved with bronze, of a king richer than any in Europe. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, admiration turned to greed. In the background, we see glimpses of armed soldiers waiting just out of sight. New powers were rising in Europe, hungry for land, for resources, for civilization. The Obas authority, once absolute, began to waver, and in the shadows, those who had long eyed Benin's treasures saw their chance. Their art was a form of writing, preserving the lineage of kings, the triumphs of war, and the wisdom of the ancestors. Each piece whispered secrets to those who knew how to listen. The British, citing a massacre of their men, launched what they called a punitive expedition. But this was no mere military action. This was a pillage on a scale rarely seen in history. The leopard spoke of the Oba's swift justice, the mudfish of his connection to Olokon, god of the sea. Even the intricate patterns on a simple armlet could tell you which royal brother commissioned it and why. But these treasures weren't just for show. The Guild of Bronze Casters held a sacred duty. And let's not forget the power. These weren't just pretty but power attracts envy, and greatness casts a long shadow. The 19th century brought winds of change. The slave trade that had fueled much of Benin's wealth was ending. Capcut prompt. A tense meeting between Benin officials and British representatives. The body language is stiff. The expressions guarded. 1897. A year that would be seared into Benin's memory forever. In a matter of weeks, centuries of history were ripped from their home. And where did these treasures end up? CapCut prompt. Split screen. Left side shows a modern auction house where a Benin bronze sells for millions. The irony is bitter. Of course, there are those who defend the current situation. And what of the argument that Nigeria can't protect its heritage? It's a claim that grows weaker by the day. But here's the real heart of the matter. These aren't just beautiful objects. They're not simply art in the Western sense. Yet, there are glimmers of hope. Germany returned 20 bronzes in 2022. A small step, but a significant one. The Vatican has followed suit. But the journey is far from over. 90% of Benin's treasures remain in exile. The British Museum, home to the largest collection, the walls of the old palace may be gone, but the spirit d'Ace that animated those bronzes, that's eternal. Let's pause here for a moment. The Sokoto Caliphate was a paradox of light and steel. Founded by jihad in 1804, it became West Africa's largest empire, yet its palaces pulsed with poetry competitions, not just war drums. Enslaved Hausa scribes copied Greek medical texts while shackled to their desks. A vizier might debate Aristotle at dawn, and order an infidel's execution by noon. In the heart of what is now northern Nigeria, the Sokoto Caliphate rose like a mirage from the soul's dusty plains. Its founder, Usman Dan Fodio, wielded both pen and sword with equal fervor, a Fulani scholar turned revolutionary. He ignited a holy war that would reshape the region's political and intellectual landscape for generations to come. The Caliphate's rapid expansion was fueled by a potent mix of religious zeal and military might. Fulani cavalry thundered across the savannah, their lances glinting in the harsh sun. Yet behind the battle cries echoed the scratching of quills on parchment. For every territory conquered, a new madrasa sprouted, its walls soon to be lined with precious manuscripts. The very scribes preserving these texts were often slaves, their ink mixed with tears of homesickness. In cramped, sweltering rooms, enslaved scholars hunched over desks, their wrists raw from iron shackles. These were the unsung heroes of Sokoto's intellectual renaissance, brilliant minds trapped in bondage, forced to transcribe the very texts that justified their captivity. But who fuels the oil? She slips him a gojja hidden in a pomegranate. Others inserted subversive verses into official correspondence, like the clerk who mistakenly replaced Allah is greatest with Allah sees injustice in a tax decree. The caliph never noticed, but the peasants did. Freedom of thought. Yes, freedom of body. Only for the chosen, for all its contradictions, it was a place of genuine intellectual ferment. The libraries of Sokoto rivaled those of Cairo and Baghdad, their shelves groaning under the weight of knowledge from across the Islamic world and beyond. Some found solace in secret acts of rebellion, slipping coded messages into the margins of official documents, or mistranslating passages to subtly undermine their master's authority. Sokoto's scholars made groundbreaking advances in agriculture, developing irrigation techniques that turned arid land into bountiful fields. They penned eloquent poetry that still moves hearts today, and engaged in philosophical debates that pushed the boundaries of Islamic thought. The caliphate's legal and administrative systems laid the groundwork for modern governance structures in northern Nigeria. The voices of those who suffered under Sokoto's rule there enslaved, the conquered, the marginalized deserved to be heard alongside the celebrated words of its most famous scholars. How do we reconcile the beauty of its intellectual achievements with the brutality of its social order? Can a society built on such fundamental contradictions ever truly flourish? And what lessons can we draw from this chapter of history as we grapple with our own modern paradoxes of progress and injustice? Their stories, often preserved only in oral traditions or hidden between the lines of official histories, offer a crucial counterpoint to the Caliphate's grand narrative. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. They established a network of schools that brought literacy to previously marginalized communities. The same education system that produced brilliant scholars also served as a tool of indoctrination, reinforcing the social hierarchies that kept the Caliphate's elite in power. The clash of swords has long since faded. The grand palaces crumbled to dust, yet the words penned by its scholars, both free and enslaved, continue to resonate across the centuries. The sons of nobles received preferential treatment, groomed from birth to take their place in the corridors of power. In the face of oppression, ideas found ways to flourish. In the midst of conflict, poetry and philosophy took root. It serves as a reminder that even in the most challenging of times, the human spirit's thirst for understanding cannot be quenched. Women, in particular, benefited from this emphasis on learning. Let it challenge us to look beyond simple narratives, to seek out the voices history has too often silenced. For in understanding our pastine, all its light and shadow, we find the wisdom to shape a more just and enlightened tomorrow. Yet it also instilled the very ideologies used to justify their oppression, creating a cognitive dissonance that many struggled to reconcile. While still constrained by societal norms, many found opportunities for intellectual growth that were rare in other parts of West Africa. At the time, turbaned men gesticulated wildly, their voices rising and falling like desert winds as they dissected the finer points of Islamic jurisprudence. Arabic, Fulfulde, and Hausa mingled in the air, a linguistic symphony that spoke to the Caliphate's cosmopolitan nature. Slaves and concubines became unlikely allies, passing messages through intricate codes woven into the fabric of everyday life. A misplaced cushion, a particular arrangement of flowers, each seemingly innocuous detail, could carry vital information to those who knew how to read the signs. They called it Iliman Juba, knowledge irrigation. Libraries flourished with stolen manuscripts from Timbuktu, but this golden age was built on back-breaking labor. In the constant flow of paperwork, a carefully altered phrase or a strategically smudged word could pass unnoticed by distracted officials. These small acts of defiance, while rarely changing policy directly, kept the flame of resistance alive in the hearts of the oppressed. The Grand Vizier's courtyard buzzed with scholarly debate, yet just beyond the polished marble columns, a different reality unfolded. The irony was not lost on them. As they carefully copied treatises on justice and equality, their own lives stood in stark contrast to the lofty ideals inked upon the page. Resistance wore many faces. Some slaves deliberately misquoted hadiths to undermine rulings. In the shadowy corners of the palace, whispered conversations gave birth to a hidden network of dissent. The caliphate's vast bureaucracy, ironically, provided cover for these clandestine activities. Yet it would be a mistake to paint the Sokoto Caliphate in simple black and white. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, no field of study was off. The Caliphate's rulers, for all their flaws, recognized the power of education, but the light of knowledge cast long shadows. For the enslaved and the poor, education was a double-edged sword. It offered a glimpse of a wider world, kindling dreams of freedom and equality. The legacy of the Sokoto Caliphate remains deeply complex. Its intellectual achievements cannot be denied. The manuscripts produced during this period continue to be studied and admired by scholars around the world. Yet we cannot ignore the human cost of this golden age. As the sun sets on our journey through Sokoto's past, we're left with more questions than answers. Gentle pausa muezzins, call blends with the chirping of Yoyan Dandy. Let's pause here for a moment. In the stillness of the night, the echoes of Sokoto's past seem to whisper on the wind. Perhaps the true legacy of the Sokoto Caliphate lies not in its moments of glory or its darkest deeds, but in the enduring power of knowledge itself. As we turn our gaze to the future, may we carry with us the complexities of Sokoto's story. In the shadowy corners of Kano's great libraries, a silent rebellion once flourished. Enslaved intellectuals, their minds unfettered despite their shackled bodies, waged a war of words against their oppressors. These were the ink-stained rebels of West Africa, wielding poetry as their weapon of choice. Under the cover of darkness, they penned Wakakin Bata shackle poems, concealing their subversive verses within the margins of Quranic commentaries. One particularly poignant couplet, whispered from caravan to caravan, captured the essence of their struggle. The ink of scholars flows deeper than royal blood, yet both are washed away by time's relentless rain. These poets were masters of double entendre, their words a delicate dance between devotion and defiance. In the bustling markets and quiet courtyards of the Sokoto Caliphate, their verses took root, spreading like wildfire among those who could decipher their hidden meanings. The Caliphate's Achilles' heel lay in its obsession with outward displays of piety. A slave might face brutal punishment for daring to speak Hausa aloud, yet find praise heaped upon them for crafting Arabic verses extolling the virtues of Hausa resilience. This paradox became the poets' playground, as they honed their skills in Takiyatha art of their most daring works, dripping with double meanings and veiled critiques, now rest innocuously on library shelves, masquerading as harmless devotional literature. But beneath the surface, these texts seethe with the passion of revolution and the ache of lost freedom. They wove intricate tapestries of meaning, layering metaphors upon metaphors. Her UV light reveals faint underwriting, a slavist recipe for tired master estate. When British colonial forces set flame to Sokoto's archives in 1903, they believed they were erasing a culture. Market prices for human lives, whispered routes to freedom, and even recipes for home remedies, all preserved in poetic code. These marginalia became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a bridge across time connecting us to voices long silenced. Little did they know that the true treasure lay hidden in plain sight, nestled between lines of seemingly innocuous text, beside a love poem to a woman sold to Zanzibar. A simple ode to a desert flower might contain, for those with eyes to see, a rallying cry for resistance. In doing so, they created a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today. Their verses became a form of cultural resistance, a way to maintain their identity and pass on their heritage to future generations. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The ink-stained rebels of Sokoto may have lived and died in chains, but their spirits soar free on the wings of their poetry. In an age of information overload, perhaps we can learn from their example, finding ways to preserve what truly matters, even in the face of overwhelming odds. A lament for a lost camel could, in truth, be a coded map leading to freedom. The poet's cunning knew no bounds. The poets of Sokoto were part of a larger tradition of intellectual resistance that spanned the region. Discovery of their true meanings could mean torture or death, yet still they wrote, driven by an unquenchable thirst for freedom, if not of the body, then of the mind. From the griots of Mole to the scholars of Timbuktu, knowledge was power and poetry was its sharpest edge. In their verses, we find echoes of universal human experiences: love, loss, hope, and the yearning for justice. By studying their words, we gain insight not just into a specific historical moment, but into the very essence of what it means to be human in the face of oppression. In corners of the globe where voices are still silenced, there are modern-day ink-stained rebels finding new ways to speak truth to power. Their story teaches us about the power of creativity in the face of adversity, the importance of preserving our cultural heritage, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The enslaved poets we've discussed were part of this broader movement, their words forming tributaries, feeding into the great river of African intellectual tradition. But these weren't mere acts of defiance, were time capsules, preserving a history that might otherwise have been lost to the sands of time. In verses, I find my true homeland where chains cannot reach. In the margins and footnotes of these surviving manuscripts, enslaved minds had carefully recorded the painful realities of their lives. Their words, once hidden, now ring out across the centuries, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the transformative magic of poetry. For, in doing so, we keep alive the flame of hope that burned so brightly in the hearts of Sokoto's poet. Though not enslaved herself, she used her privileged position to educate and empower women throughout the region. Her poems, still recited today, speak of strength, faith, and the importance of knowledge. A dash of extra spice might signify a safe house along an escape route. The arrangement of grains in a bowl could map out the positions of guard posts. One particularly haunting fragment, discovered only recently, speaks volumes. In the shadow of the bay where chains meet earth, I plant my words like seeds may, they grow tall and free. The poets of the Sokoto Caliphate were not content to merely survive. They sought to thrive, to preserve their humanity in the face of deep. Consider the ingenuity of their methods. Slaves working in the kitchens of their masters would encode recipes for freedom in the very dishes they prepared. These poets were not just wordsmiths, but alchemists of the soul. They transmuted their pain into beauty, their oppression into art. Gentle pauser, dry, kakoki wind instrument groans like a sigh. Let's pause here for a moment. As we gaze up at the vast African sky, let us reflect on the power of words to transcend time and circumstance. Their legacy challenges us to look beyond the surface, to seek the hidden truths in the world around us. The story of these poets is not just a tale of the past. It's a reminder of the ongoing struggle for freedom of expression around the world. As we delve deeper into the archives of West African history, we uncover more layers of this rich tapestry. Consider the tale of Nana Asmau, daughter of the Sokoto Caliphate's founder. Learn, O women, for knowledge is light, illuminating the path through darkness bright. Osma US work reminds us that the struggle for education and empowerment has deep roots in West African soil. But let us not romanticize their struggle. The reality of enslavement was brutal, and the risks these poets took were immense. Their poetry serves as a bridge, not just across time, but across cultures. As we conclude our journey through this chapter of West African history, let us carry with us the lessons of the ink-stained rebels. In the words of another anonymous poet from the era, though my body may be bound, my thoughts roam free as desert wind. May we honor their memory by continuing to seek out and amplify the voices of those who struggle to be heard. As the embers of our fire die down and the kakaki's mournful notes fade into the night, we are left with a profound sense of connection to those who came before us. The camera zooms in on Timbuktu, its golden mosques gleaming in the desert sun. By the 14th century, Mali stood as a colossus astride West Africa, its wealth in gold and salt the envy of the known world. And indeed, while Mali's scribes dutifully chronicled the glories of past rulers, they failed to notice the rot spreading through the foundations of their world. The once mighty army, grown fat on tribute and plunder, found itself increasingly outmatched by nimbler foes. Trade routes shifted, leaving once bustling markets to wither in the unforgiving Sahel sun. But like all great powers, the seeds of its decline were sown in the very soil of its success. As the Malian court reveled in opulence, the outlying provinces began to slip from its grasp, one by one. The rise and fall of empires is a tale as old as civilization itself. The once unified empire fractured into competing states, each vying for supremacy. The great cities of Timbuktu, and once beacons of learning and culture, found themselves caught in the crossfire of petty warlords and ambitious generals. The very trade that had built its empire now undermined it, and as Mali's power waned, it was the common people who bore the brunt of the chaos. Farmers abandoned their fields, fleeing marauding armies. Scholars buried their precious manuscripts, hoping against hope to preserve the knowledge of generations. As the 17th century progressed, Mali's influence waned further still. New powers rose to fill the vacuum. The Bamana Empire, the Fula Jihads, and eventually the encroaching tendrils of European colonialism. Rival powers coveted its riches, while internal strife tore at the fabric of society. Behind them, a modern city skyline rises, a testament to the enduring resilience of West African civilization. In the distance, the glow of burning villages paints the night sky red. But if you listen closely to the wind that whispers across the sun, you might hear it, the faint echoes of empire, the rustle of ancient scrolls, the clink of gold in long-forgotten vaults. For in the end, it is not the rise or fall that defines a civilization, but the stories it leaves behind. Its fall serves as a stark reminder of the impermanence of power, the cyclical nature of history, yet in the stories passed down through generations, in the traditions that survived conquest and change, the spirit of Mali endures. The myth of Timbuktu, a city of gold and wisdom, captured imaginations from Lisbon to Cairo. The slave trade, once a pillar of Mali's economy, became a cancer eating away at its moral core. Empires are built on paper as much as gold, the old griots would say. The decline was not swift, but inexorable. Like water wearing away stone, the pressures of time and change eroded Mali's power. The Songhai, once vassals, now flexed their muscles. Behind them, slaves strain under the weight of goods bound for distant lands. To the north, Berber tribes sensed weakness and pressed their advantage. And from across the sea came whispers of pale-skinned strangers with ships that dwarfed anything seen on the Niger. All that glitters is not gold, goes the proverb, and Mali's wealth proved a double-edged sword. As the 16th century dawned, Mali's grip on power slipped further. Cap-cut prompt, a battlefield strewn with bodies, the golden standard of Mali trampled in the mud. Vultures circle overhead. When elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers, say the wise. Yet even in decline, Mali's legacy endured. The stories of its wealth and power spread far and wide, inspiring explorers and dreamers for centuries to come. But myths, no matter how alluring, cannot halt the march of history. Today, the Empire of Mali lives on primarily in memory and legend. The fire burns low now. We've ere whispered in the halls of ancient empires, and listened to the echoes of forgotten voices in abandoned villages. These tales, my children, are not mere stories. They are the very heartbeat of our land. He places 3 cola nuts into the embers. They're cracking, echoing like distant drum beats. The earth beneath us holds memories that no book can capture, secrets that only the wind and the baobab trees truly know. And so, my little lions, we have journeyed through the tapestry of time, our feet treading the paths of kings and commoners alike. The old griot's voice, weathered by years of storytelling, carries a weight that keeps even the sleepiest child's eyes from fully closing. The camera pulls back to show these scenes reflected in the storyteller's tear-filled eyes. His gnarled hands, each line a story unto itself, move with practiced grace as he tends to the fading embers. See how the past lives on in the present, in the hands of the artist in Lagos, shaping scrap metal into the fierce beauty of a Benin leopard. The children, usually so full of restless energy, sit perfectly still, caught in the spell of his words. In the voice of the young girl in Sokoto, her tongue dancing with the ancient poetry of our ancestors, it is a great circle ever turning, where triumph and tragedy dance together. The sound hangs in the air, a bridge between past and present. The same hands that built monuments to cruelty also raised great centers of learning. As it fades, the image dissolves into a starry sky, mirroring the exact constellation pattern from the night the Kano Chronicle was first written. The griot's voice drops to a whisper, barely audible above the morning breeze, and Pink, the children slowly rise, their eyes still heavy with sleep, but their hearts full of wonder. He knows that in their dreams they will walk with queens and warriors, scholars and artists, and when they wake they will carry the fire of their ancestors within them, ready to light the way for generations yet to come. They carry with them not just stories, but a living, breathing connection to their past that will shape their future in ways they have yet to imagine. The tongues that once cried out in anguish now sing songs of joy and freedom. In the laughter of a child in Ghana, her tiny fingers tracing the same walls that have stood for centuries. The silent defiance of the Hausa eunuch, whose name history forgot, but whose courage changed the course of an empire. No, they are testament to our endurance, our resilience. They prove that even in the darkest night of oppression, the flame of our spirit could not be extinguished. When they sought to silence us, our songs only grew louder. When they tried to erase our past, we etched it deeper into our hearts. The thunderous hoofbeats of Queen Amina's cavalry, shattering the limits of what a woman could achieve in a world of men. The stolen treasures of Benin, torn from our soil, but never from our souls. The hidden libraries of Timbuktu, where knowledge survived the flames of ignorance. Listen closely, for in these tales lie the seeds of our future. The cola nuts pop and hiss, releasing tendrils of fragrant smoke that weave through the air like the very threads of memory the griot speaks of. The children lean in, their eyes wide, drinking in every word as if it were the last drops of water in a drought. These are not stories of defeat, my little ones. Look around you, little lions. Tears glisten in the old man's eyes, reflecting the first rays of dawn. So as you drift into sleep, carry this truth in your hearts. Our history is not a straight line from darkness to light. The griot's fingers, gnarled but still nimble, pluck a single haunting note from his gouge. And remember, my little lions, no matter how low the fire may burn, no matter how dark the night may seem, the children lean in, holding their breath as the last ember flickers and fades. It never truly goes out. As the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold, the old griot watches them go, a small smile playing on his lips.